A disturbing part of Canadian history plays out in a new novel that's set in St. Catharines. Author Ed Lee joins us with more now on The Laundryman's Boy. Thanks so much for joining us. I was fascinated to read how much research you had done into St. Catharines, kind of at the turn of the last century. And a lot of it is based because your grandfather worked in St. Catharines.
My grandfather did come to St. Catharines as a very young teenager, and he worked in a restaurant in St. Catharines with his elder brother.
And he had come from China and had to pay the head tax to come here.
He paid the $500 head tax, like all the Chinese men of his generation. And so he had to pay that tax for the privilege of coming to Canada at that time.
And then faced really horrific racism.
He faced kind of an official systemic kind of racism that was prevalent in Canada at that time. It was political oppression, there was legislative exclusion, and there was kind of societal segregation as well. So he faced all that discrimination and racial prejudice when he came here, as did all the Chinese that came at that time.
Mm-hmm. One of the characters mentions in the book that people at that time, when you came to China, and it was largely men, you either went into the restaurant business or you were in the laundry business. So why did you kind of set this theme as The Laundryman's Boy?
I was always fascinated by laundries that I had seen in Montreal growing up. I remember going into an elder uncle's, a laundry that was owned by one of my elder uncles, and walking into this small, damp, dark vestibule and staring up at this wooden counter on which he had placed packages of washed shirts and laundry tickets and an abacus and things like that. And there were shirts hanging from the ceiling, and there was a big curtain. And I remember my elder uncle, the laundryman, stepping out from behind the curtain and kind of just staring down at me. So this idea of the laundry remained with me for years, and I kind of had this idea, well, what about this generation of men who came years and years ago? What about their stories? How can I preserve their stories, or how can I have those stories brought out so that people can know about the sacrifices that they went through and how they persevered in the face of all this racism and what they did for their wives and families.
Mm-hmm. And wives and families that they had to leave behind. Your grandfather, it was 5 years before he saw his wife?
My grandfather left his wife and child in China and came to Canada and worked. And there was one period where it was 12 years before he had a chance to go back to China to see his wife and family. So my dad told me he never saw his father until he was 12 years old.
12 years old. And yet, as bleak as some of the topics are, it's a real story of hope, because it's focused on a young boy, Hoi Wing, and kind of the opportunities that he, the things that he fights against, but the opportunity that he gets in St. Catharines.
Hoi Wing has this great urge to get an education, and he desperately wants to learn English. He desperately wants to understand more about the land he's come to adopt as his homeland. He desperately wants to find a way to enter the school system. So he works very hard, and he's lucky enough to meet a young Irish scholarly maid who helps him learn English, and then he meets two other women who one of whom is a former missionary to China, who help him learn English so that he can try to enter the public school system in St. Catharines.
Mm-hmm. It's your first novel. I can't wait until you write another one, actually. And I know you're at a sold-out event, a brunch at the Art Gallery of Burlington today, but on Friday, Ed is going to be leading a discussion on The Laundryman's Boy. It's part of the Grimsby Author Series at the Grimsby Public Library, and it's a very popular series, so I think tickets are still available for that. If you can, please go to the Grimsby Public Library on Friday night at 7 o'clock and pick up this book, because it's the research that you've done on historic St. Catharines is just fascinating. So thank you very much for sharing your story, Hoi Wing's story, and your grandfather's story.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll get the links up on our website, chch.com/morninglive.